which is the overarching premise of the Capital Shift program, Tom Rauen, which is this notion of as you are more successful over the course of your career, you have more resources than you may have had when you first started. And so consequently, as your resources grow and improve, your thinking has to change from being a capital accumulator to being a capital deployer. So as you are going through that metamorphosis, you actually are going through a bit of an identity change in the process. So hence the name, the Capital Shift program. So welcome, Tom. Happy to have you.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So you want to tell all the stewards out there a little bit about Tom and your background and how we found ourselves on this happy program today?
Yeah, for sure. So I founded 1-800 T-shirts 20 years ago, right out of college. And so that's been my primary job as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur, growing that business now to 40 employees and, you know, pretty full staff. And during that process, as we were continuing to build the business, we were running into a lot of problems entrepreneurs have, or is we were making great money, but the tax man would come knocking at the door. So I knew, you know, a lot of very wealthy people use real estate as a vehicle to create passive income. And the other part was, like, as a business owner, entrepreneur, like, I wasn't sure what retirement looked like, whether that was an age or money amount or something. And I wanted to have that diversification on hand to, you know, kind of have a backstop, I guess you could say, but then also to, you know, be earning some passive income, you know, besides that, and building some wealth in the background. So we started investing in commercial real estate, primarily triple net lease focused. And so that is big names. So our tenants are like Starbucks and Arby's and Applebee's and national franchises with 10 to 25-year leases. And the reason we focus on that asset class is because as like a full-time business owner, you know, no different than someone else that has a full-time job, I didn't have the time to dedicate to dealing with tenants and toilets and all this other stuff. And I'm not like a handy dude, so I can fix maybe a few things, but I'm not really. So I didn't want to like be fixing stuff and having to, like, you know, deal with, like, I don't even like to fix stuff around our own house, let alone somebody else messing it up.
Right.
So that's how we found this asset class. And it's absolutely phenomenal asset class because I truly believe it's the only passive asset class that's out there. The rest of them are actually a lot more work. This is the only true one that you can set it and forget it. And, you know, there's not all these other things going on. So that's why we love this asset class. It worked out really well because we could build our lifestyle around it, whether that's with work or with family or traveling and everything else. And as we look towards the future of, you know, retirement and things like that, this asset class still offers all that freedom and flexibility.
Well, and unlike some of the other operators and the other classes that we've interviewed as a part of the program, there's weights and balances. You know, we're teaching the stewards that are consuming this product how to learn the 4 different sort of measures that someone who's making a real estate investment is generally seeking. And, you know, the fun part, Tom, like, in many ways, you just described most of the people who are going to be watching the program because they don't have time for another job, just like you didn't have time for another job. They're already doing a lot of work for the thing that makes them the significant amount of money that their jobs afford them. And the idea of taking on a complete other set of tasks seems like the worst possible idea in the world of everything to most of these people, because they're putting their heart and souls into what they're doing, you know, in solving problems for their clients. So the idea of then having to take on this added responsibility is just like, okay, so you've clearly most likely gotten these people's attention around like, yeah, that sounds exactly right. So break it down a little bit more about why you believe it is truly passive. Like, and when we say triple net, like, there may be people who don't even know what the heck we're talking about, right? So let's unpack it a bit for folks who maybe are a little uninitiated.
Yeah, this got me super excited when you sent me this. So tax efficiency, equity leverage, cash flow creation, capital velocity.
Yes.
Now, there's some other asset class where you might get 1 or 2 of those.
Right.
I'll tell you what, I don't know the scoring system. It looks like a 1, 2, or 3.
Yep.
we're scoring like fives on all those, maybe even higher, like off the charts.
All right, well, talk to the people. Like, what makes this so unique that the scores would be so
all right, so here's the unique part, and I don't like I kind of like to keep this hush hush because but I'm gonna let you guys in on a little secret. This is truly the best asset class, and the reason I call it a secret is because most people don't realize you can actually own these properties. You will never see a for sale sign in front of Starbucks or in front of McDonald's, right? You're driving down the street. Think of when you go to get coffee in the morning or any of the high traffic areas in your city. You never see them for sale. So that's why they're easy to get, but hard to find because people don't know some of the inside tricks on getting these off market. They're not listed with, traditional realtors and stuff like that. And typically these are owned by big private equity or big hedge funds and stuff like that, but they're also owned by investors just like you and me. So what these properties look like, when I say passive and completely hands off, triple net lease. So to simplify the jargon and the terms of a triple net lease, it basically means the lease terms are set up that the tenant pays all the property taxes, all the insurance, and all the maintenance. And not only pays for them, they take care of it. We don't even have keys to the property. It's not even turnkey because we don't even have keys.
Right.
They literally ACH us the monthly rent. So we don't even get a rent check. So we're not depositing a check either. It's ACH directly into the bank account. We pay our mortgage to the bank, and the rest is the cash flow that we get to keep as passive income. There's no other bills. There's no other like, oh, well, what about this? What if we have to fix this? What do we have to do this? That's not a thing. It's all structured in the lease that the tenant covers all expenses. They take care of it. They handle everything. And there's not another asset class that can do that for you. And so it checks so many boxes. I'll just start with tax efficiency standpoint.
Yeah. Like this is the best part. Like I don't even need to interrupt you because you know what levers it is that people are interested in hearing about. So yeah,
we're pulling all the levers, and we're not just pulling the levers. So when I say like some of the other asset classes might pull a lever or two, the powerful thing here is when you can stack and compound each of the lever on top of each other, because then it's just like it's creating this flywheel effect. And that's when like you really just start a lot. So to put this into perspective, again, I'm going to just say this against all other asset classes because nothing even measures up. We have 45 property, 95 tenants, because some of them aren't single tenants, some of them are strip centers as well. My wife manages all these properties in less than 10 hours a week. Now, this is $100 million portfolio. There is no other place you can have $100 million portfolio with less than 10 hours a week.
correct.
And so let's start off with tax efficiency standpoint. So from tax efficiency standpoint, we can do a cost segregation and move up the depreciation. What that means is instead of on a commercial property, you typically write off the value of the property over a 39-year period. With a cost seg, we're going in and saying, okay, the parking lot is worth this. And we've got professionals that are doing this. And on like a medical building, they're going in and saying, okay, we've got additional infrastructure in here of, certain electrical specs. They've got coolers. So they're going in and kind of dissecting every little part of the building and say, well, instead of over 39 years, we can bring this up to 5 years. And so from a tax perspective, we're writing off a huge loss, even though it's cash flow positive. From an accounting perspective, we're writing off a big loss. Then there's two specific asset types in the triple net lease space where you can get 100% bonus depreciation, basically of the purchase price in year one. And that is car washes and gas stations. So if you had a big exit of a business where you sold some shares, or, we see this a lot in the tech world where someone gets bought out or whatever the case is, and they've got a big tax problem. So let's just say that number is they've got to write the IRS a $2 million check. Ouch. Well, so these properties, we're putting, let's say 20% down payment. So we could buy a gas station or car wash for $2 million. Okay, that's purchase price. Down payment, $400,000. Okay, so instead of $2 million check going to the government, we've got $400,000 check going to towards the down payment of this property. The $2 million, because that's the cost of property, we can write off that full amount. So now the amount going to the government is zero. It only costs you $400,000, and you've got an income producing asset that's going to continually increase in value, pay distribution, and increase over time. So, like, how does that sound? Instead of writing a check to the IRS, why would you not want to do that?
And for the operators that have spoken to this listener base, and from the conversations that many of our subscribers are already having with us, everyone immediately flocks to short-term rentals because that's what everybody wants to hear about, right? But when you start digging into that asset class in comparison, this is when we start saying, like, okay, didn't we just say you already have a job? I swear we just said that you worked at a tech job that requires a lot of your time and attention and passion. And so now you're going to go manage a short-term rental.
You know, short-term rentals is real estate. It's actually, you're getting in the hospitality business disguised as a real estate investment, because you've got to have the customer service or everything else. So the other part we look at on this, when we compare the triple net lease commercial real estate to any other asset classes, some people are really big into numbers, right? So we've got our spreadsheets and we're doing this analysis, and it's, all right, I'm getting an 8% return on my investment and maybe a 10% cash on cash return and all these other numbers, right? And it's like, what is, because ultimately it's like, what is my return on investment versus if I was just going to put it in the stock market or even a CD in the bank, right? Like, how can we maximize this return? And we of course look at that, but there's a couple things that most people don't factor in. And it's ROT and ROH.
Okay.
Nobody knows what that means because I think I made both of them up.
I think I've got one of them.
It's return on time.
Yeah.
That's ROT. And then ROH is two things, return on headaches and return on hassle.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
I want 100% return on time, headaches, and hassle. I don't want to deal with any of that stuff. So that's why I love this asset class. Some guy's talking to me, he's like, oh yeah, last year we made, with our short-term rental, we made $56,000. And I was like, oh, that sounds decent. And I was like, how much time did that cost? And he goes, my wife, it's about 35 hours a week.
Yeah. I
said, so you bought her a $50,000 a year job?
Right.
And so that's the big thing. The other is, as these properties, because they're so hands-off, you can start what I call stacking them. And after a couple of years, you're building up equity because you're paying down the mortgage to the bank. They're increasing value. So now you've unlocked some additional equity there, and you can refinance or take out a second note against this property to buy a second property. Now you've got two working for you, and you can keep compounding and snowballing that. And that's how we've been able to really grow our portfolio a lot. And with that, banks love these types of properties. So right now, for a single family home or multifamily, banks are lending at between 7-8% for these types of properties. They're not just looking at your credit score, they're looking at the credit rating of the tenant. And Starbucks, you know, they're a highly rated tenant, publicly traded company. And so we're able to get financing right now on these properties for 5.5 or 6%. They also love these because the nature, it's a 10 to 25 year lease.
Sure.
It's long term. We're not worried about this tenant turnover and it being vacant for a couple months and all this other stuff. It's like, no, these guys are here, you know, for the long haul. And so I like that predictability as well. So as much as we look at the returns, we also look at the stability and the risk. And I'm all about, because we work so hard for our money, right? I'm all about risk protection and capital preservation. It's one thing to make money. It's another to protect it and protect the downside risk. And so when we're looking at these, we look at the value of the property and I say, okay, if we're buying this for $1 million, what would be the cost 5 years from now or 10 years from now if this was a vacant piece of land and I had to rebuild this building? On a $1 million property that we're acquiring today, I look at that and say, okay, well, if I was going to buy this piece of land, then build a building and find a tenant for it 5 or 10 years from now, If that number is like 2 or 3 million, then we're sitting in a pretty good position.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. And, we're talking about lever, and we'll just go back to short-term rentals for just a moment, only because there's been so much activity and buzz around short-term rentals when it comes to tax efficiency. But when you think about the equity side of things, there's a lot of commonality. It's equity pay down. There's notes on the property that are being paid, but the velocity of appreciation in commercial properties versus residential. You want to talk a bit about how those two do not tend to track in the same?
Yeah, they're completely different. The one thing with these commercial properties is it's really based on numbers. There's no you can't have emotion involved with it. When you start getting emotionally involved, it sways your decisions and things like that. And with a short-term rental, especially if it's in a really nice place, it's easy to get emotionally tied into it, especially if you're thinking, well, I'm going to use this as a second vacation home or something like that. And that's going to kind of change some of your decision-making things. But with commercial properties, regardless of kind of where the market is, or even interest rates for that matter, the value holds strong because you've got these big private equity companies, hedge funds and stuff, where they're just paying all cash. So they're not even relying on bank financing. So that keeps the value of these constant and stable. The other part is typically these leases have 2% annual increases already baked into the lease for the next 10 to 25 years. And so we know every year it's increasing in value by at least 2%. The other little market fluctuations may be the cap rate, where it could compress a little bit. And if it's a strong market, you can get, extra value there. And so it's a different, it's just a different environment as far as stability and market goes compared to a single family home or short-term rental.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to presuppose what a listener, a watcher would be thinking in this moment, right? And it's sort of like, I haven't heard anything that is the Achilles heel. Like, where's the Achilles heel, Tom? What is the thing? Because you're going to answer the questions around how people get paid and when they get their money back. You'll already answer those. So we know that there are answers, as you've said, to each of the poles in the compass. So as you consider the other two elements of this equation, where would you also be saying, okay, I'll tell you the Achilles heel too?
Yeah, the Achilles heel. So not all properties are created equal. So even though it is very passive and there's, long-term security and everything else, you still have to be smart about it. You have to go on real estate fundamentals. You don't want to be paying for a property that is the tenant's paying above market rent, or you're paying above replacement costs on the cost per square foot. And then high traffic areas, like we're not buying, so we look at smaller tertiary markets. I focus on Iowa because a lot of people don't even know that it's out on the map. So we eliminated a lot of competition by focusing on Iowa. But in these smaller tertiary markets, we look at the highest traffic area in a city. So we're not going in, to an area where it's like it's in the middle of nowhere. It's surrounded by the core dense population of people in that town. It's I call it the corner of Main and Main, like the most popular intersection, right? Something does, if a tenant doesn't, make it work, somebody else is going to want that spot because it's such a prime spot. So we got to think about that. Some things out of our control are, franchisees that, are underperforming, or franchises that just don't keep up with the changes in consumer buyer, patterns and stuff like that. An example is right now, Burger King and Hardee's. I would not buy a Burger King or a Hardee's property because I don't think as a company they're keeping up with some of the other smash burgers and kind of more innovative menu stuff and marketing and things as some of the other brands out there. Another one that comes to mind is KFC and Popeyes. I just don't think if we're going to call it the chicken wars versus Chick-fil-A, and then you've got Raising Cane's, and now hot chicken is coming on strong. Like who's going to win that? A typical KFC or Popeyes is doing about 1.5 million in revenue a year. Chick-fil-A store, I think the average store is doing 7.5 million. And that's 6 days a week.
Right. Right. Yeah.
right? So you have to understand, like, okay, is this, do you believe in that franchise, in what they're doing for the next 5, 10, 20 years? Is that something that's going to be around? One of my favorites is Olive Garden. I don't think I've ever seen an Olive Garden close down. It might be like an anomaly, right? And so I'm like, all right, I've gone to the same Olive Garden since I was in high school,
All
for
right.
homecoming, and the Olive Garden's still there. I want to buy the Olive Garden because it's going to be there for the next 40 years.
Yeah.
So you think of those type of spaces, and then that's how you reduce the risk. So just because you can buy something that's like, I don't know if Hardee's or Burger King's going to be there, or KFC for sure, unless it's like, man, even if KFC moves out, I know 100% somebody else is going to take. There's another person just waiting for that spot.
Sure. Yeah.
So you've got to be mindful. You can just, it's triple net lease, everything's foolproof. You want to look at we look at their revenue numbers, and we make sure that their revenue can support the rent that they're paying. And, we try to get financials and stuff like that to just back up. That's part of the due diligence. So there's a whole list of due diligence stuff that we look at. As a small business owner, I look at Google reviews. We go to the places. If it's a restaurant, we eat there, we see how their management is, how their employees are, and, just get a good feel for, like, what's the traffic coming in and out of this parking lot. And so those are some things that, like, you don't see on a spreadsheet, but we understand as a business owner and a consumer, like, okay, are these guys doing all the business fundamentals right to run a good business, to be able to pay for rent ultimately, right?
For sure. For sure. Well, and, this is another one of those where curb appeal really does matter. So if the parking lot is a mess, like, that's a consideration. If it looks like there's been a lot of deferred maintenance by the existing owners, I mean, these are all just sort of the common sense parts of the equation that go into this evaluation. But I think what you're trying to impress upon folks is it doesn't have to be a hairy, scary gorilla that you can't learn how to be efficient and effective in with a little bit of effort and dedication, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So talk to the people, like, usually how do you get your money back? How do you get your money out? Like, I know we talked about refinance. Is that usually the long-term play? Is you're just trying to build the equity so you can go take what you've created and turn it into something new, right?
Yeah, I mean, really, you want to have some sort of exit plan or some sort of plan in place for each property. And that might be, for some of these, because, we see these properties where families will hold them for generation among generation. A lot of the properties we bought, we're the first time it's ever been sold.
Wow.
It's been in a family for 20, 30, 40 years in some cases. And we've had the opportunity to purchase these. And I'm thinking, no one's going to see this property get sold again, because we're going to hand it down to our kids or grandkids someday, type of thing. So we call these the legacy properties that, they're just sitting there. And once you get them rolling, I mean, there's no reason to sell it, because, like, all right, if they got a lease locked in for the next, 15 or 20 years, I mean, that's my kids are 7 and 9. Like, I think I'm like, man, they might be married by the time.
For sure.
So yeah, they are typically just this long thing. And then there's some other strategies where, you could do it. You could own one of these properties for 3 or 4 or 5 years and sell it and do a 1031 exchange into the next property, which means you're rolling the capital gain without having to pay capital gains tax. You're basically rolling that basis into the next property. And so some people do that. But with that, you keep stepping up the value. So you take a $1 million property, it goes up to 1.5 million. You build up a bunch of equity into it, and then you sell that, and now you're buying a $2 or $3 million property.
Sure.
So you can keep building up that way. There's also options where you could build up a portfolio of these properties and sell the entire portfolio at once to, a big private equity company.
Yeah. Well, and if we're really playing Monopoly and we have our board out right now and we're staring at it, what we'd say is, if you suddenly have 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 institutional investors really like to buy portfolios of stable, long-term, high-profile tenants that they have the same affinity for that Tom and his group have developed for all the same reasons.
Yeah.
Which means that once you, as the buyer of said product, establish a track record of performance, it makes it very easy for you to develop a relationship with institutional buyers to the point where it's not constant cold calling on your part in order to be able to figure out what your exit strategy may be. There's willing and able partners who would love to take that phone call from anyone who has built that kind of portfolio. So it's one of the, like, when you talk about this asset class and you talk about like end game, this one's super strong because the real money is waiting for anyone who's successful in building in this class. So good on you for giving it a go, buddy.
Yeah. So, with that said, I don't know if another asset class is like this, but we have buyers on a weekly basis, either calling or sending us letters or emails saying, hey, I'm interested in buying this property, XYZ property. Is it for sale? Or a broker calling and saying, hey, listen, I've got a couple buyers. They like buying Dollar Generals, or they like buying BioLife Medical, or they like buying Starbucks. I see that you own this one here and this one here. Is this for sale, or would you like us to put together an offer? And so we're entertaining offers all the time. And it's like, man, it's kind of fun to not even have to openly market it or say, we were not planning on selling this, but for the right offer, we will happily sell it, right now. Absolutely. And so it's such a big advantage and that's how you've got a great asset when people are actively looking to buy it.
Oh my God. Well, and not even that. Talk about having a really good finger on the pulse of what the going rate in the market is when you're constantly getting the opportunity to have offers be made to you. Like it even helps you understand if you're going to go make a purchase.
Yeah, for sure.
The going rate for things is. So nothing like being in the mix, and that's valuable no matter what asset class you're participating in. But this one, for many of the people who might be like, wow, that would be really interesting. I mean, the way to get started is just go start walking your neighborhoods, right? Like,
yeah, for sure. Like, I say here's the way to get started. It's the first question is, well, how do I find these properties, right? Or someone will usually come up to me and say, you know what, there's this vacant lot down here in the corner. How do I find Starbucks or McDonald's or someone to build on this lot? I'm like, no. We're not building. That's risk, that's speculation, and that's a lot of work because that's development. Doing is saying, okay, think of a place in your town that is on one of the busiest streets. Someone that's been there for a while, so they've got a nice track record. They've been there for at least 5 or 10 years, maybe even longer. I think about, like I said, the Olive Garden where we went to dinner at for a high school homecoming in prom, and I'm like, it's still there, right? And so I'm like, this Olive Garden's always going to be there. And so you think about those like in this so it's the prime intersections, high traffic areas, and the places that the parking lot is always full. Yeah. Drive-through lane's full, the parking lot, whatever the case is. And so those are the tried and true places that are already established. They've got good management, they've got good employees, they've got a dialed in customer base that is used to going there out of habit. And so then once you have that identified, what I say is, all right, now we create our top 10 or our top 20 list. Like, what are these top 10 or top 20 dream properties in your town? Then you can do a lookup there's a couple different websites. So typically local assessors website. You can look up and find the property owner information. So, a lot of times these are owned in an LLC. So now we've got to get into what I call like private investigation mode. How do we figure out who owns ABC LLC, right? And so every state's a little different. Most states you can type it in. Now with AI, I'll tell you what, you can basically type it into Google and figure out who owns it. So we've got some sophisticated software that helps with this, where we can gather their address, the name, their cell phone numbers, email addresses, everything, basically. But it's as simple as putting it into Google, figuring out, okay, Joe Smith owns this. Then you type in Joe Smith in the city, and you figure out, all right, who's Joe? Is he a local doctor? Is he a local business owner? What does he do? And does he have other properties, or is this his only one? And then the step after that is, once you understand like who the owner is, and maybe you get a phone number or an email address. And that's where when we Google it, we figure out like, all right, Joe's a local dentist, or he's a local doctor or maybe a real estate investor or something else. They probably have like a business website, and then that's where we can uncover a phone number to get a hold of. We can call it the business, say, hey, is Joe there? Joe, I see you own the Starbucks down the street. I'm interested in acquiring that property. And so that gets you first in order. The key here is you want to start building a relationship with the current landlord, right? So once you build that relationship, he might say, you know what, I have no intention of selling. And a lot of people don't at the moment. However, we build the relationship once we reach out, and we continue to reach out and build this relationship with that landlord, because we know inevitably over time, something's going to happen. There's going to be a pain point. There's going to be a life event that happens. So someone's going to get divorced. There's going to be a business partner breakup. Someone's going to get a life illness. Someone could pass away, and it could, go into an estate or get passed down to their kids, or just some other financial thing may happen where it's like, you know what, we've got to sell this property, or we're looking to sell it. And so you're just waiting for that time. You can't predict, or you don't know when it's happening, but keeping in constant contact and building that relationship, you want your name at the top of the stack and the number one person they're ready to call when something does happen. It helps them avoid paying for a broker fee. It gives them an easy exit because they already know, like I said earlier, people are always calling me up, and it keeps me intrigued and keeps me thinking, okay, we got people on the list and sort of potential buyers for these properties. And so you want to be the top of the list on the top properties in your city that you're looking at. And some might happen sooner than others. Some might take, a month, some might take 3 years. But if it truly is the top 10 or top 20 properties in your area, it's worth the wait, because these could be legacy properties that are creating that passive income and wealth for your family for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years in multiple generations.
It's like finding your life partner.
Yes, no doubt. Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I think I finally got it. Here it is.
Yeah. So when we first started doing this, and we brought investors on, and I've been teaching this to others on how to do this specifically with this asset class. And the thing a lot of people just don't know, and the thing is, like, we all went to school and went to college, and we were taught how to trade our time for money and how to work for our money. And one of the investors said, you know what, I've gone my whole life, and it wasn't until after talking with you about this asset class that I learned on how to have our money work for us, and the money make more money, and not me have to work for it all the time. And that's the key here to unlock, is how to get our money to make that money and not be trading our time for the money.
Yeah. All right. So you won't know this, but one of the threads that we teach in RealWise is the idea that capital has temperament, right? So some of your money is patient and some of your money is not. And your impatient money should not be hanging out in these asset classes, right? This should be your patient money, because in much the same way as what you're saying, once your patient money is in the places it's doing its job, the only thing you can do to mess it up is mess with it. Leave it alone. Let it do its thing. Because what that money is doing is it's creating the money to do all of the other stuff. That's the amplification fund that will allow you the chance to go, I don't know, maybe get one of these 20 buildings that you've been working on for 5 years, and you've given yourself ample runway and money to be able to do it, because you knew that this wasn't going to be a decision that was just going to happen tomorrow. Oh, I love that, Tom. I knew you'd nail it. I knew you would, but we're doing this thing. So one, I'm going to give you a chance to tell everybody how they can find you. But beyond that, for the paid members of the RealWise Collective, we save an extra question for them, which is the one that you saw at the bottom of the list, which was, if somebody suddenly woke up with $500,000 and it's 3 years later and they don't want to be regretful, what would be your advice? How can the people find you?
Yeah, find me at Fast Food Landlord, fastfoodlandlord.com, or follow me on Instagram at Fast Food Landlord.
All right, I'm jazzed up. I got to go. That's it. That's all. That's everything. I got to go call somebody. I got to go do something, because now I'm all fired up. So thanks, man. I appreciate it. It was great. Yeah. It was cool. Always good, dude. Always freaking good.